Ever wonder what happens when you take a luxury motorhome, slap some fake armor on it, and call it a military assault vehicle? Well, that's exactly what Hollywood did in 1981 for the comedy classic Stripes. The EM-50 urban assault vehicle became one of cinema's most memorable fake military machines. But here's the thing. Behind that intimidating exterior was basically a tricked-out RV with some seriously weird engineering choices. From Christmas lights pretending to be high-tech displays to a smokescreen powered by theater equipment, this vehicle was pure movie magic held together with plywood and hope. Today we're counting down 20 weird facts about the EM-50 that prove sometimes the best military vehicles are the ones that could never actually survive a real battle. And trust us, some of these behind-the-scenes secrets are even more ridiculous than the movie itself. So buckle up, because we're about to take this urban assault vehicle apart piece by piece. Number 20, the EM-50 was built from a GMC motorhome, chosen for its aerodynamic shape and spacious interior. When the Stripes production team needed to create their fictional military vehicle, they didn't start with an actual military transport. No, they went shopping at RV dealerships. The base for the EM-50 urban assault vehicle was a 1976 GMC motorhome. You know, the kind of vehicle retired couples take to Yellowstone, not into combat zones. The GMC motorhome was actually a pretty revolutionary RV for its time. It had front-wheel drive, which was unusual for something that size. It had an Oldsmobile Tornado drivetrain, and most importantly for the film, it had this sleek, futuristic body that already looked vaguely military if you squinted hard enough and had maybe 3 beers in you. Director Ivan Reitman specifically chose this model because of its distinctive shape. The thing already looked like it came from the future with its smooth, curved fiberglass body. Most RVs back then were basically boxes on wheels, but the GMC had these flowing lines that made it look fast even when it was parked. Of course, looking fast and actually being fast were two completely different things, which the stunt drivers would discover pretty quickly. The spacious interior was another selling point. They needed room for all those fake control panels, weapon racks, and space for Bill Murray and Harold Ramis to bounce around during action scenes. The GMC motorhome had 23 feet of interior space to work with. That's a lot of room for comedy hijinks. The production bought 3 identical GMC motorhomes for the film. One for the hero shots, one for stunts, and one for backup because, well, when you're turning luxury RVs into assault vehicles, things tend to break. Number 19. The production team added faux armor panels that were lightweight plywood, not metal. Here's where movie magic really starts to show its cheap side. All that intimidating armor plating that made the EM-50 look like it could withstand enemy fire. Pure plywood, folks, not steel, not aluminum, not even thick plywood. We're talking about 1/4-inch sheets that you could punch through if you really wanted to ruin the illusion. The art department had to get creative with making wood look like military-grade armor. They used a technique called scoring, where they carved fake weld lines and bolt patterns into the plywood. Then they painted everything with this special textured paint that had sand mixed into it. From more than 5 feet away, it actually looked pretty convincing. Get any closer though, and you could see the wood grain showing through in places. Weight was the biggest concern. The GMC motorhome already weighed about 13,000 pounds empty. Add real armor plating and you're looking at something that wouldn't move without a tank engine. The plywood panels added maybe 300 pounds total to the vehicle. That's less than having 2 extra passengers. They attached these panels using basic wood screws and construction adhesive. Some panels were actually held on with heavy-duty Velcro, so they could be quickly removed between shots for maintenance. The funniest part? During one scene where the EM-50 supposedly crashes through a barrier, they had to replace the front armor panels 3 times because the plywood kept splitting on impact. The props department eventually started keeping a stack of pre-painted replacement panels on hand. They went through about 40 sheets of plywood during the entire production. That's enough to build a decent-sized shed, which is basically what they did. They built a shed on wheels and called it an urban assault vehicle. Number 18. The rooftop turret and side guns never fired. They were props with electric swivels. Only every good assault vehicle needs some serious firepower, right? Well, the EM-50's weapons were about as dangerous as a super soaker. That menacing rooftop turret that looked like it could take down a helicopter? It was made from PVC pipe, an old barbecue grill housing, and parts from a junked washing machine. The whole thing was powered by a windshield wiper motor from a '67 Chevelle. The side-mounted guns were even more ridiculous. They used modified aluminum baseball bats as the barrels. The production team bought them from a sporting goods store, spray painted them black, and attached them to electric motors salvaged from old garage door openers. When you see those guns swiveling menacingly in the movie, they're being controlled by a props guy hiding inside with a jury-rigged joystick made from arcade game parts. The ammunition belts you see feeding into these weapons were actually bicycle chains painted brass color. They bought about 200 feet of bike chain from various shops around Los Angeles. The shell casings that appear to be loaded in the weapons were empty. CO2 cartridges collected from the craft services department's soda machine. They glued them to the bike chains to create the illusion of serious ammunition. Here's the really weird part. They actually had to add speakers inside the turret housing to make mechanical sounds because the windshield wiper motor was too quiet. They recorded the sound of an electric can opener and played it on a loop whenever the turret moved. So every time you see that turret tracking a target in the movie, you're actually hearing someone's kitchen appliance. The side guns made a clicking sound that was actually a recording of a ratchet wrench played through tiny speakers hidden in the mounting brackets. Number 17. Armor skirts hid the RV's standard wheels to give it a military-grade silhouette. One of the biggest giveaways that your military vehicle is actually a motorhome would be those distinctly civilian wheels and tires. The EM-50's designers solved this problem by building armor skirts that hung down to about 4 inches from the ground, completely hiding the GMC's standard Alcoa aluminum wheels and Michelin tires. These skirts were engineering nightmares. They had to be rigid enough to look like armor, but flexible enough to move when the vehicle hit bumps. The solution? They built them in sections connected by heavy-duty door hinges painted olive drab. Each section was about 3 feet wide, and they'd flex independently when the vehicle moved. From the outside, you couldn't see the hinges, but from underneath, it looked like a really aggressive accordion. The skirts caused massive problems during filming. They'd scrape on every slight incline or speed bump. The sound department hated them because they made this horrible grinding noise whenever the vehicle turned. They went through about 15 sets of skirts during production because they kept getting torn off during driving scenes. The props department eventually started making them from corrugated plastic instead of plywood because it was cheaper to replace. The rear wheel skirts were even worse. They had to accommodate the dual rear wheels of the motorhome, so they stuck out further. This made the vehicle about 8 inches wider than it legally should have been for street driving. They actually got pulled over by California Highway Patrol twice during filming on public roads. The production had to get special wide load permits for any scenes shot outside the studio lot. The best part? In several scenes, if you look carefully, you can actually see the real tires peeking out underneath when the vehicle goes over bumps. They just hoped nobody would notice. Spoiler alert, people noticed. Number 16. Despite its assault label, the real engine was a stock 455 Oldsmobile V-eight with modest output. For something called an urban assault vehicle, you'd expect some serious horsepower under the hood. What the EM-50 actually had was the same engine your uncle's 1976 Oldsmobile. 98 probably had a 455 cubic inch V-eight that wheezed out about 230 horsepower on a good day, and that was before they added all the fake armor and equipment. This engine was designed for comfort cruising, not combat maneuvers. It had a 2-barrel carburetor that was tuned for fuel economy, not performance. The thing got about 8 miles per gallon normally, but with all the added weight and the constant stop and start of filming, they were lucky to get 5. The production went through about 1,200 gallons of gas during filming. The fuel budget alone was $15,000. The transmission was a 3-speed turbo Hydromatic 425, which was bulletproof reliable, but about as exciting as watching paint dry. First gear was so low that the vehicle's top speed in first was about 15 miles per hour. This actually helped during action scenes because it made everything look faster than it really was. When you see the EM-50 racing through streets in the movie, it's usually going about 25 miles per hour tops. The engine overheated constantly. All that extra plywood blocked airflow to the radiator. They had to install 2 additional electric fans just to keep it from boiling over during long takes. Between shots, they'd have crew members standing by with portable fans pointed at the engine compartment. They went through 3 water pumps and 2 radiators during production. The mechanics on set joked that the real assault was on the cooling system. By the end of filming, the engine was so worn out that it would diesel for about 30 seconds after being shut off, coughing and sputtering like it was dying. Number 15. The film added retractable weapon racks that slid out on rails powered by stagehands off camera. Those cool sliding weapon racks that emerge from the sides of the EM-50 like something from a James Bond film. Pure manual labor, baby. No hydraulics, no motors, just good old-fashioned stagehands pulling ropes like they were operating a medieval drawbridge. The racks themselves were built from electrical conduit welded into frames. They rode on drawer slides, the same kind you'd find in your kitchen cabinets, just heavy-duty industrial versions. The production bought them from a restaurant supply company that usually sold them for commercial refrigerators. Each rack could hold about 50 pounds of fake weapons, which sounds impressive until you realize the weapons were mostly rubber and plastic replicas that weighed about 2 pounds each. The rope system was hilariously complicated. They had to drill holes through the actual RV's floor and run aircraft cable underneath. The cables connected to pulleys mounted under the chassis, which then ran to handles where stagehands could hide just out of camera view. It took 2 people per rack to operate them smoothly, one to pull them out, one to control the speed so they didn't slam open. During one take, a stagehand pulled too hard and ripped an entire rack off its rails. It went flying about 10 feet and nearly hit Harold Ramis. The timing of these racks opening had to be perfect for each shot. They actually had a choreographer just for the weapon rack sequences. He'd stand behind the camera with a whistle, giving signals to the rope pullers. Tweet meant pull, 2 tweets meant stop, 3 tweets meant something went wrong and reset everything. The crew called him the Rack Maestro. In the final film, they added mechanical sound effects in post-production to make it seem like the racks were motor-driven. The actual sound on set was just squeaking metal and grunting stagehands. Number 14. The smokescreen effect came from theatrical smoke machines plumbed under the chassis. That impressive smokescreen, the EM-50, deploys to confuse enemies. It's the same technology used in haunted houses and rock concerts. The production team bought 6 theatrical fog machines from a special effects supplier in Hollywood and jerry-rigged them under the vehicle's chassis using PVC pipe and metal brackets. The installation was a complete nightmare. They had to run separate power lines from the RV's electrical system to each fog machine. The machines used a glycol-based fog juice that cost about $40 per gallon. During the smokescreen scenes, they'd burn through about 10 gallons in just 3 minutes. The fog had this sweet, slightly chemical smell that made everyone on set slightly nauseous after long exposure. Several crew members claimed they got headaches from it. The fog machines had to be triggered manually from inside the vehicle. They installed a control panel that looked high-tech but was actually just 6 household light switches mounted in a Radio Shack project box. Each switch controlled 1 fog machine. The operator had to flip them in sequence to create the right smoke pattern. If you fired them all at once, the fog would be too thick and you couldn't see anything for the shot. Here's the really weird part. The fog was heavier than air, so it would pool around the vehicle instead of dispersing like real military smoke. They had to use industrial fans just out of frame to blow the fog where they wanted it. In one scene, they had 12 fans running simultaneously. The noise was so loud they couldn't record dialogue and had to dub everything in post-production. The fog also left this oily residue on everything. After each smoke scene, they had to wash the entire vehicle and the surrounding pavement. The studio lot's maintenance crew banned them from using the smoke machines near any buildings after fog seeped into an office ventilation system and triggered a fire alarm. Number 13, the high-tech lenses were repurposed camera housings painted matte black. All those sophisticated-looking sensors and targeting systems bristling from the EM-50's hull, most of them were empty camera housings from broken or obsolete film equipment. The props department raided equipment rental houses and bought their junk bins for pennies on the dollar. They had old Bolex 16mm camera bodies, broken Nikon lens housings, and even a couple of damaged telescope parts from a local astronomy shop. Everything got spray-painted matte black to look uniform and military. They'd attach red or green LEDs inside some of them, powered by 9-volt batteries. The LEDs would blink randomly. There was no pattern or meaning to it, just random blinking to look technological. The large main sensor on the front was actually the housing from a broken television studio camera from the 1960s. It was huge, about the size of a microwave oven. They gutted it completely and installed a disco ball motor inside to make the lens rotate slowly. The lens itself wasn't even glass. It was a clear plastic salad bowl from the craft services table, painted with transparent blue paint to give it that high-tech tinted look. The infrared sensors were the best scam of all. They were toilet paper tubes wrapped in black electrical tape with calculator screens glued to the ends. From more than 3 feet away, they looked exactly like expensive military hardware. The production made about 40 of these fake sensors for $5 each. Real military sensors would have cost thousands per unit. During night scenes, they'd put glow sticks inside some of the tubes to create an eerie green glow. The glow sticks only lasted about 4 hours, so they went through boxes of them. After filming Wrapped, the props department tried to return some of the camera housings to the rental houses, but most were so damaged from drilling and painting that they just threw them away. Number 12. The front ram was bolted wood and fiberglass to avoid damage to filming locations. That menacing battering ram on the front of the EM-50 that could supposedly punch through barriers and gates. It was about as solid as a movie prop wall, which is to say not solid at all. The ram was built from 2x4 lumber frames covered with thin fiberglass sheets, the kind used for shower stalls. The construction was deliberately flimsy for a very practical reason: insurance. The production's insurance company freaked out when they heard about plans for a vehicle with a battering ram. They imagined lawsuits from damaged buildings and injured stunt performers. The compromise was a ram that would crumble on impact rather than actually ram anything. It was basically a crumple zone made of Home Depot materials. They went through 7 rams during filming. Every time the EM-50 hit something, even lightly, the ram would need repairs or replacement. The props team got so good at building them that they could construct a new ram in about 2 hours. They'd pre-build the wooden frames and keep sheets of fiberglass ready to go. The painting process was down to a science: primer, olive drab base coat, weathering with black paint, and fake rust around the bolts. The mounting system was intentionally weak. They used aluminum brackets that would bend before transferring any real force to the vehicle's frame. During the scene where the EM-50 breaks through a checkpoint barrier, the ram actually fell off completely on the first take. They had to reshoot with a new ram attached with stronger brackets, but still designed to break away if it hit anything solid. The sound of the ram hitting things in the movie, that's not the actual impact. It's the sound of a sledgehammer hitting a dumpster, recorded separately and added in post-production. The real impact sound was more like crushing a cardboard box. Number 11. The backdoor troop deployment hatch was cut into the RV solely for comedic timing. GMC motorhomes don't come with dramatic rear deployment doors. They have regular RV doors on the side like any civilized camping vehicle, but the script called for soldiers to pour out the back during action scenes, so the production literally took a sawzall to a perfectly good motorhome. The cutting process was terrifying for everyone involved. The GMC motorhome's body was made of molded fiberglass, and nobody was quite sure what would happen when they cut a huge hole in the back. Would the whole structure collapse? Would it crack? The art department reinforced the area with steel frames before making the cut, basically building a roll cage inside the back wall. The door itself was a masterpiece of good enough engineering. They used barn door hinges from a farm supply store because they were the only ones strong enough to hold the weight. The door was supposed to drop down like a ramp, but it was too heavy and would slam down with enough force to crack concrete. They had to add garage door springs to slow its descent. Even then, actors had to jump back quickly after releasing the latch or I'd risk broken toes. The door created massive structural problems for the vehicle. The motorhome would flex and twist during driving, causing the door to jam. They had to adjust it constantly between takes. WD-40 became their best friend. They went through 12 cans just keeping that door operational. Water leakage was another issue. Despite rubber seals around the edges, rain would pour in during wet weather. They kept tarps and towels on hand constantly. The door's comedic timing was entirely manual. A stagehand would hide inside with a rope attached to the latch. On cue, they'd yank the rope, the door would fall, and actors would rush out. The timing had to be perfect. In one take, the stagehand pulled too early, the door dropped, and Bill Murray wasn't ready. He ad-libbed a line about premature deployment that made everyone laugh but couldn't be used in the family-friendly film. Number 10. The high-tech cabin panels were mostly repainted plywood with Christmas lights behind mesh. Step inside the EM-50's command center, and you're greeted by walls of blinking lights, mysterious switches, and technical displays that scream military sophistication. In reality, you're looking at the clearance section of a 1981 Radio Shack held together with wood glue and hope. The main control panels were built from half-inch plywood painted battleship gray. The production team drilled hundreds of holes and inserted Christmas lights. Yes, the same ones your grandmother used on her tree. They bought about 3,000 multicolored bulbs from post-holiday sales. The lights were wired to blink randomly using timer circuits from model train sets. There was no logic to the blinking patterns. Red didn't mean danger. Green didn't mean safe. It was just random twinkling to look busy and important. The mesh screens covering these lights came from a hardware store. It was aluminum window, screening spray-painted black. They'd backlight it with more Christmas lights to create a glow effect. The radar screen was particularly creative. It was a green floodlight behind a window screen with a rotating piece of cardboard to create the sweeping effect. The cardboard was powered by a rotisserie motor from a barbecue grill. The toggle switches and buttons were the real deal. Military surplus from an Army-Navy store. But they weren't connected to anything meaningful. Maybe 1 in 10 actually controlled something, usually just more lights. The actors would flip switches dramatically during scenes, having no idea what they were supposed to do. Harold Ramis later joked that his character could have been turning on a coffee maker for all he knew. The labels on these switches were made with a label maker from an office supply store. They said things like deploy, engage, and activate without specifying what was being deployed, engaged, or activated. The production assistants made a game of coming up with the most military sounding but meaningless labels possible. Number 9, the upper periscopes actually functioned, made from surplus Navy optics. In a sea of fake technology, the EM-50 had one element of genuine military hardware, working periscopes salvaged from decommissioned Navy submarines. These weren't props. They were actual optical instruments that had once helped real sailors navigate real oceans. The production bought them from a military surplus dealer in San Diego who specialized in submarine equipment. They cost $8,000 for the pair, which was more than they spent on all the fake armor combined. The periscopes were from a World War II-era submarine and weighed about 200 pounds each. Installing them required cutting precise holes in the roof and reinforcing the mounting points with steel plates. The optics still worked perfectly after 40 years. You could actually see clearly through them with about 4 times magnification. The problem was, they were designed for tall submarine compartments, not the low ceiling of an RV. They had to modify the extending mechanism so actors could actually reach the eyepieces. Bill Murray, who's 6 feet tall, still had to crouch awkwardly to look through them during filming. Here's the weird part. The periscopes were so well built that they threw off the vehicle's center of gravity. 200-pound weights mounted high on the roof made the EM-50 dangerously top-heavy. During sharp turns, the vehicle would lean dramatically. They actually tipped it during a test run, though thankfully at low speed with no one inside. After that, they added ballast weights low in the chassis to compensate. The periscopes required constant maintenance, the leather seals around the eyepieces had deteriorated and needed replacement. The rotation mechanisms had to be lubricated daily or they'd freeze up. A retired Navy mechanic was hired just to maintain them during production. He said it was easier keeping them running on a submarine than on a movie set. The periscopes were the only parts of the EM-50 that were later sold to collectors for serious money, about $20,000 each. Number 8. Some armor plates used air pistons to pop open dramatically on cue. For scenes where the EM-50 takes damage or deploys hidden weapons, the production needed armor plates that could pop open on command. Their solution involved pneumatic pistons typically used in industrial automation, controlled by a tank of compressed air hidden in the vehicle. The system was ridiculously over-engineered for what amounted to a few seconds of screen time. They installed 12 pneumatic cylinders at various points around the vehicle, each connected to a specific armor plate. The air system ran at about 90 psi and could fire all pistons simultaneously or individually. The control system looked like something from a pipe organ, with individual valves for each piston operated from inside the vehicle. The flying armor effect was harder to achieve than expected. The first test sent plywood panels flying 30 feet, which was way too dangerous for filming. They had to add flow restrictors to slow the pistons down. Even then, they had safety cables attached to each panel to prevent them from hitting crew members. The cables were thin aircraft wire, invisible on camera but strong enough to stop a flying piece of plywood. The compressed air tank took up valuable space inside the already cramped vehicle. It was a 100-gallon tank that had to be refilled every 4 or 5 takes using a portable compressor. The refilling process took about 20 minutes and sounded like a jet engine. They could only do it between scenes because the noise would ruin audio recording. The tank also had an annoying tendency to leak. They went through more pipe tape and fitting compound than most plumbing supply stores stock in a month. The best malfunction happened during a crucial scene where all the panels were supposed to pop open simultaneously. Instead, they fired in sequence like dominoes because of a pressure drop in the system. It actually looked cooler than planned, so they kept it in the film. Sometimes technical failures create better effects than careful planning. Number 7. The RV received firmer springs to reduce sway during stunt driving. A stock GMC motorhome handles about as well as a yacht on wheels. The suspension was designed for comfortable highway cruising, not tactical maneuvers. When stunt drivers tried to make it look aggressive and military, The thing wallowed around corners like a drunk elephant. The suspension upgrade was a Frankenstein mixture of parts from different vehicles. They used heavy-duty springs from a 1-ton pickup truck in front, and airbags from a commercial bus in the rear. The shock absorbers came from a racing supply company and were originally designed for off-road trucks. Nothing was really meant to work together, but somehow it did. Sort of. The ride quality after modifications was punishing. Every bump felt like hitting a brick wall. The stunt drivers wore kidney belts like motorcycle racers to protect their backs. Even at low speeds, the vehicle would bounce violently over small imperfections in the road. The actors complained constantly about being thrown around during driving scenes. They added extra padding to all the interior surfaces after Harold Ramis got a black eye from hitting a control panel during a particularly aggressive turn. The modified suspension created new problems. The stiffer springs raised the vehicle's ride height by about 3 inches, making it even more top-heavy. The front end would lift dramatically under acceleration, which looked cool on camera but terrified the drivers. They had to add 200 pounds of steel plates under the front bumper as ballast. The airbags in the rear had to be constantly adjusted depending on the shot. For normal driving, they'd run about 60 psi. For action scenes, they'd pump them up to 100 psi to reduce body roll. The compressor system for the airbags failed regularly from overuse. They went through 4 compressors during filming. Number 6. Most chase sequences use slow speeds because the EM-50 handled poorly when weighted movie magic makes everything look faster than reality. Those exciting chase scenes where the EM-50 tears through city streets, they were filmed at speeds that wouldn't get you a speeding ticket in a school zone. The vehicle's top safe speed for stunts was about 35 miles per hour. Any faster, and it became genuinely dangerous. The combination of high center of gravity, added weight, and modified suspension made it incredibly unstable. During one test run at 45 miles per hour, the vehicle went into a tank slapper oscillation that nearly flipped it. After that, they instituted a strict 35 mph speed limit for all action sequences. Camera tricks made everything look faster. They'd undercrank the cameras, shooting at 18 frames per second instead of 24. When played back, at normal speed, everything appears 30% faster. They'd also use longer lenses to compress the background, making it blur past more dramatically. The sound department added engine noises from actual military vehicles to make it sound more powerful and faster. The stunt drivers had to develop special techniques for making slow speed driving look aggressive. They'd saw at the steering wheel to create more body movement. They'd tap the brakes before corners to make the nose dive dramatically. They'd accelerate hard for just a second to lift the front end, then immediately back off. It was all about creating the illusion of speed and power without actually having either. The most dangerous scene was actually one of the slowest. When the EM-50 crashes through a wooden gate, they were only going about 15 miles per hour. But the impact, combined with the vehicle's weight and poor handling, caused it to veer sharply left. The stunt driver had to wrestle it back under control while staying in character. They did 12 takes of that scene because they kept veering off their marks. Each take required rebuilding the gate, which cost about $500 in materials and labor. Number 5. The matte olive finish used aircraft-grade flat paint to avoid reflections during night shoots. That perfect military olive drab paint job wasn't just for looks. The production used specialized aircraft paint that cost $300 per gallon because regular paint caused massive problems with film lighting. The first paint job used standard automotive paint from Earl Scheib. It looked great to the eye, but was a disaster on camera. The slight gloss created hot spots where lights would reflect, ruining shots. During night scenes, every street light, every crew light, every ambient source would create distracting reflections. They had to completely repaint the vehicle with military specification flat paint designed for aircraft that need to avoid radar detection. The paint application was insanely detailed. They used high-volume, low-pressure spray guns typically used for aircraft refinishing. The paint had to be mixed with a special flattening agent that made it absorb light rather than reflect it. The mixture was so flat that fingerprints would show permanently if anyone touched it before it fully cured. The entire vehicle had to be cordoned off for 72 hours after painting. The paint was also incredibly fragile. It would chip if you looked at it wrong. Every branch that brushed against it, every piece of gravel that kicked up, would leave a mark. They had a full-time painter on set whose only job was touch-ups between takes. He'd walk around with a small airbrush, fixing chips and scratches constantly. By the end of production, the vehicle had about 15 layers of paint in some spots from all the touch-ups. The paint had another unexpected benefit. It made the vehicle nearly invisible at night without lights on it. During one night shoot, They actually lost track of where they'd parked it because it blended so perfectly into the darkness. They had to add reflective tape markers just so the crew could find it. The paint absorbed so much light that it would actually get hotter than surrounding surfaces during sunny days. You couldn't touch the vehicle's surface after it had been sitting in the sun without burning your hand. Number 4. The spinning dome was a repurposed commercial satellite dish motor, that intimidating radar dome on top of the EM-50, constantly rotating and scanning for threats. It was powered by a motor designed to help couch potatoes find the best satellite TV signal in 1981. The dome itself was a fiberglass radome from a small aircraft bought from an aircraft salvage yard for $200. It was originally designed to house weather radar equipment on a Cessna, but making it spin convincingly required some creative engineering. The production team bought a commercial satellite dish positioning motor from a high-end home electronics store. This thing was meant to slowly adjust large satellite dishes to track satellites across the sky. The motor was hilariously overpowered for spinning a lightweight fiberglass dome. It could have rotated something 10 times heavier, but that extra power came in handy when they decided to add lights inside the dome. They installed a ring of theater lights inside to create a glowing effect during night scenes. The lights, their wiring, and the slip rings needed to transfer power to rotating lights added about 50 pounds to the assembly. The rotation speed was controlled by a variable resistor, basically a giant dimmer switch. The operator could make it spin anywhere from 1 revolution per minute for scanning scenes to about 10 RPM for action sequences. Any faster and the dome would wobble dangerously. They actually threw the dome off completely during one test, sending it flying across the studio lot. It crashed through a production office window, though fortunately, no one was hurt. The motor made this annoying grinding noise that sounded nothing like military equipment. It was more like a garbage disposal eating a spoon. The sound department had to remove it from every scene and replace it with the sound of an electric turbine from a jet engine test facility. The real motor also had to be lubricated every 4 hours of operation or it would seize. They went through gallons of lithium grease keeping that stupid dome spinning. Number 3. A small onboard generator, powered lights, panels, and rotating props for self-contained filming. The EM-50 needed to be a self-contained movie set on wheels. All those blinking lights, rotating turrets, and glowing displays required serious electrical power. The GMC motorhome standard electrical system couldn't handle it, so they installed a gasoline generator that turned the vehicle into a rolling power plant. The generator was a 5 kilowatt Honda unit mounted in what used to be the rear storage compartment. It was barely adequate for the job. With all systems running, they were pulling about 4,800 watts, dangerously close to the maximum. Circuit breakers would trip constantly. They had to create a power priority list deciding which effects were most important for each shot. If they needed the turret to rotate and the dome to spin simultaneously, they'd have to turn off half the interior lights. The generator exhaust was a major problem. The fumes would drift into the vehicle during filming, making everyone sick. They tried various exhaust extensions, but nothing worked perfectly. Eventually, they installed a marine exhaust system with a water-cooled muffler. They'd connect a garden hose to it when stationary, using the studio's water supply to cool and quiet the exhaust. This worked great until someone forgot to turn on the water and melted the entire exhaust system. The noise from the generator made recording dialogue impossible. Even with extra sound insulation, it sounded like a lawnmower running inside a metal box. Every scene inside the moving EM-50 had to be dubbed later. The actors would mouth their lines while the generator roared, then record the actual dialogue in a sound studio weeks later. Bill Murray reportedly hated this process and would deliberately change his lines during dubbing, creating continuity nightmares for the editors. The generator used about a gallon of gas per hour when fully loaded. The tank held 5 gallons, so they'd have to stop and refuel every few hours of filming. One time, they ran out of gas in the middle of a take, and everything shut down instantly. The sudden darkness caused Harold Ramis to walk into a wall, and Bill Murray ad-libbed a line about military budget cuts that had the crew in stitches. Number 2. 2 separate interior sets existed, one for driving shots and one for action sequences. Here's something most viewers never realized. When you see the inside of the EM-50, you're actually looking at 3 different locations. There was the actual RV interior for driving shots, a larger studio set for action scenes, and a partial mock-up for close-ups. The actual vehicle interior was cramped and impossible to film in properly. With cameras, lights, sound equipment, and crew, there was barely room for actors to move. They could only shoot very specific angles, usually through the windows or from fixed camera positions. These shots were mainly used for scenes where you could see the vehicle was actually moving. The main interior set was built on Stage 15 at Burbank Studios. It was about 30% larger than the real interior, giving cameras room to move and actors space to perform. The walls were wild, meaning they could be removed individually for different camera angles. The ceiling was completely removable for overhead shots. This set had better lighting, safer props, and padded surfaces for stunt work. About 70% of interior scenes were shot here. The weird part was matching the two interiors. The set decorators had to constantly compare photos to make sure every switch, light, and panel matched between locations. They had a continuity Bible just for the interior details. Even then, sharp-eyed viewers can spot differences. The spacing between panels is different. The color of some lights varies. The seat positions don't quite match. The production hoped fast cutting would hide these inconsistencies. The third setup was a partial cockpit mock-up mounted on a gimbal for motion effects. When you see actors being thrown around during action scenes, they're in this mock-up being rocked by grips, pulling on ropes. It was basically a theme park ride dressed to look like the EM-50 interior. They could create any movement, sharp turns, sudden stops, explosions. Warren Oates allegedly threw up twice during filming of the more aggressive motion scenes. Number 1, despite being a joke vehicle, the EM-50 became a cult icon and inspired real fan-built replicas. The ultimate irony of the EM-50 urban assault vehicle is that this cobbled-together movie prop, held together with plywood and plumber's tape, became one of the most beloved fake military vehicles in cinema history. Fans have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building replicas of something that cost about $30,000 to create originally. The first replica appeared just 2 years after the movie's release. A fan in Texas bought a GMC motorhome and spent 3 years converting it based on paused VHS screenshots. He didn't have access to production blueprints, so everything was estimated by eye. His version actually used steel armor plating, making it barely drivable, but definitely more authentic than the original. He spent about $60,000 on the conversion, twice what the movie prop cost. By the late 1990s, the EM-50 had achieved legitimate cult status. Fan clubs formed specifically around the vehicle. They'd share construction tips, trade screenshots, and argue about details like the exact shade of olive drab paint. Someone created detailed blueprints by analyzing the film frame by frame and measuring visible objects for scale reference. These blueprints, more detailed than anything the original production created, became the Bible for replica builders. The craziest replica story involves a group of ex-military engineers who built a functional version. They added actual armor plating rated for small arms fire. The turret had a working paintball gun system. The smokescreen used military-grade smoke grenades. It was registered as an experimental vehicle and could only be driven on private property. They claimed to have spent over $200,000 on it. The original film's producers were simultaneously impressed and concerned about liability issues. Today, at least 15 known EM-50 replicas exist worldwide. They show up at comic conventions, car shows, and movie memorabilia events. The original surviving prop vehicle, the one used for hero shots, sold at auction in 2015 for $120,000. Not bad for a motorhome covered in plywood. The buyer reportedly spent another $50,000 restoring it, including replacing all those Christmas lights with modern LEDs. The vehicle that was never meant to be taken seriously became a serious piece of cinema history, proving that sometimes the best military vehicles are the ones that could never survive actual combat. And there you have it. 20 weird facts about the EM-50 urban assault vehicle that prove Hollywood magic is equal parts creativity and complete insanity. From Christmas lights pretending to be high-tech displays to stagehands pulling ropes to deploy automatic weapons, this glorified RV became a comedy legend through sheer determination and lots of plywood. Who knew that a motorhome dressed up for Halloween would become one of cinema's most beloved military vehicles? If you've got your own favorite movie vehicle that's probably held together with duct tape and dreams, drop it in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes breakdown, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about Hollywood's beautiful lies. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best assault vehicle is just a recreational vehicle with delusions of grandeur.